Hey, Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be talking about atmospheric sounds with Harmor. Now, this is literally a huge field. So I've created a variety of sounds. Some of them will blur with other categories. The first one is one of my personal favorites, is just a sine wave. And what is my definition of an atmospheric sound? There's different kinds of atmospheric sounds. They're the kind that are just elements in the background, not necessarily have a tone, or they don't have a pitch, but they have a tone. They have a tone, they don't have a pitch, and they just sort of act as elements in the background. There are the kinds that, atmospheric obviously creates an atmosphere of some kind, so it makes you feel like you're somewhere. That's one of the goals. So it's very closely related to the pad sounds that we did earlier. And a lot of these categories can be blown up into really, just depending on the moves you make, you'll end up with very different results. So the first one's a sine wave. And I've turned on the harmonizer, but I've turned it off. And most of these for me are characterized by the type of reverb. I tend to use the same reverb on all of these because I sort of made them all in one setting. So, but in different settings, I would probably experiment with other kinds of reverbs. So there's an example of one that may just be something like in drum and bass that would be considered a very useful sound. Like you could use that. Not necessarily in like the biggest track ever. And then we have this thing. And so it's just a nice sound, sort of like a harpsichord type deal. And then finally, we've got one of these. And then the idea behind this one is as you keep playing and playing, it'll build up more and more reverb, and then the reverb dies away slowly. So it creates sort of a wash as it comes up. Very interesting idea. Could be used more. And on this one, I use harmonics. Harmonics are actually super useful for the way they spread them out. It sounds gives it sort of a bell-like texture. But that's actually quite common in E pianos and things like that to have harmonics above it. So the overtones are not harmonically related. So what's the deal? How did I make the sine tone? Let's start with that one. Well, it's a pretty simple fix, and you see the reverb plays a big role in this one. And I like how it's late reflections. It's not the early stuff. So first I went to the timbre window and I turned off all the harmonics except the first one, and then I turned that one down because it was just really loud. Should be familiar from the sub bass video. So after that, I came in here and I turned the reverb on, and I believe that was it. Now the reverb, I went with a medium-sized room. I don't know. I'm not sure what you'd say this. The size is like just below halfway. The decay is up there. It is around 5.5 seconds. So it's a long decay. And the dampening has been raised, so it's letting the high stuff through. If I turn all the way up, this stuff goes through, but it doesn't sound super natural that way. So that's what's going on in this patch. Not a whole lot, not super crazy, very simple patch, but I think it's one of my favorite sounds. Like it's just nice. All right, so here we have this sort of creepy time is actually what he's saying. And I have created an envelope here. So how do you, go watch my Harmor from the Ground Up series if you're really curious about that. But what I did was I dragged
what time is it?
That into here. And then what you do is you hold down Control and click. You'll develop an envelope. And you'll have to spread some of the points apart. And then you can control the fade. And the fade can sometimes play a huge role in how it comes out. So you want to be careful. I messed with the formants down here. The speed, the timing, where it starts. I don't believe I touched sharpness. And then finally, I turned the C down to 0. But this could definitely be characterized as something to mess with in an atmospheric knob. Other things. I moved the harmonizer up a little bit, and I messed with the blur. The blur is on. So if I turn the blur off, this is something that would be definitely something you'd have to sort of customize to your pitch. And the volume envelope is very particular. So I have this sort of curve at the beginning. So if I hold my note, but if I just pluck it, it'll skip down to this lower volume, but still have sort of a natural release out. So this volume envelope starts off right at the peak and just there's the sustain and then the release. So it's sort of that one was kind of important. Now there's reverb on this too. There's pretty much reverb on everything. And I had portamento on with not the biggest slide time. If for whatever reason you did that, I was working on another sound and ended up switching it, and it's just something that sort of carried over. Now the unison's on. It's on and blurred. I wonder, it'd be kind of interesting to see what random does. Sounds like a bunch of munchkins coming to get me. So it's on order 5. Nothing too crazy. My unison's not on. My chorus isn't on. These two, they spread it out differently. Like this one is more CPU intensive, but the pitch variation on it is just nicer, I think, than the way the chorus goes about doing it. So that's pretty much this patch in a nutshell. Let me make sure I didn't miss any secret envelopes. Nope, I didn't. Oh, the EQ's on. That's the curve because I could just disable it right here. That's what it was before. I was looking for more of the mid-high because it was going to be a background sound. I didn't want it taking up a lot of the spectrum. So, okay, next up. Sort of reminds me of Tron. Now, this is just a simple plug. I have the plug on halfway, but I also have a volume envelope with it halfway going down. I like this combo because, first off, it's a softer thing, so the attack doesn't like kill you when it hits you. So it's more intuitive to work with. But the pluck also, we get the pluck filter, and it's just a convenient way to go about creating sort of that sound. So on the EQ, there's nothing going on. There's the filters, nothing going on. And it's a really simple sound. And then you just turn on the reverb. Some of this stuff, and there's unison, of course. There's unison with a little bit of pitch variation, just so I could get some volume, some panning with some different voices. Just very useful. And there's a very, very, very tiny amount of sub. Like I'm not sure you can see it, but it is higher than those other knobs. With it off. Just a very subtle move to give it a little more bottom end and feel. This would be something that I could have like. It could create an atmosphere, trust me. So if we come over here, this last one. This is sort of the monster, but if I were to not so dramatically change the fundamental pitch and probably protect it, we'll get a tone from this. And my So you can create, as you can see, the wall of sound. That was the idea behind this, was to sort of have this sort of messy thing create this big wash. And the idea would be you start off playing soft notes, you bring it up at times. So you start off playing, like some notes. They're not the loudest notes. I'm hitting all major keys, so it sounds sort of heavenly. And what I want to do on this is I want to high pass it. I know I had a different filter there, but I'm going to high pass it, automate that. And You see, we get this really interesting thing. That whooshing is caused by the resonance. And then you could continue going on with something else. Maybe bring in the sine tone and begin to mix these sounds with that other one, right? This one. Not that one. This one. And sort of put them all together, and you start getting this really sort of interesting, moving, morphing texture thing with lots of stuff going on. In fact, let's maybe create a small track real quick. But first I should explain the rest of the patch. So we have this going on. And something that I would like to see on this is have its pluck come up, but then have it decay out. Just have really subtle things in the background. So this thing's running on... It's got the prison going. It's got the high pass, as I just turned on, going. Prison's just barely off to spread out the harmonics, make them a little bit, you know, in anger against the fundamental, like rebel, whatever. You have chorus. The order's up. And so it's modulating depth and speed. Watch Harmor from the ground up. Series, we got reverb. Reverb's up big time. Huge reverb. The dampening's not happening, so it's not being dampened too much, just a little bit. And the size is again at about medium. I believe that's the default position, and the filters are up, so it's not being cut out in any way. And then we have the delay, which is on, which with such a long sound doesn't make an enormous difference. With the harmonizer, I believe that's it. That is it. So that's all there is to that sound. Pretty simple tone, but when you start combining these things, which is where the magic starts to happen. So first, let's get rid of this. Let's create an atmosphere, yeah? That's dope. Okay. Maybe it'd be like a sort of a trance type feel. And then while this thing's doing its thing, we're going to have an ARP. We're going to have a minor, whoops, whatever. We're going to have a minor, F minor, come on. Let's just a sec. I heard something. That's nice. We're going to have this on the second time. We're going to clone it. Whoops. And I want this to fade in. So I'm going to automate the volume. These higher ones, I want them to be more of an echo. Just like a, not an echo, just a tiny faint. So when you're working with this, you need to be aware of a couple things. First of all, you need to know what the Fletcher-Munson curve is. That we're more sensitive to these frequencies anyway, so they'll already perceive louder. We've got masking, which they're far apart enough that masking doesn't play anything, so I don't know why I just mentioned masking. But then also your speakers will be better usually at reproducing these tones than low stuff. However, these aren't super low, so it shouldn't make a huge difference. But you should definitely be aware. I guess the main point is Fletcher-Munson curve. Be aware of that. If you don't know what that is, it's the fact that we do not hear linearly. So, okay, now let's add... We're just going to have these things continue on their way. Why add more little points? I don't know. Some people probably be thinking that. Like, why is he adding so many tiny points? Just a little more variation. Whoops. And then right here, we'll have a melody come in. Sort of a chill track. Imagine throwing a drum beat on this. Not that one. This is the one I want. Right here, we're going to have our melody. We're starting on F. Okay, here we go. No. And take it. I have a slow melody. Probably be easier for me to just play something in. But I just... Now, I don't have velocity sensitivity on my keyboard enabled right now. Just everything being super loud is not going to fly right now. One of the few cases where I want it. All right, here we go. So you can see, I mean, I was off to a little bit of a rough start. You got to get in the jam, of course. You can't just, I mean, some people can. I just took a little bit while for me to get in the mood. But you just get going and to learn the keyboard sensitivity because you don't use it that often because when you hit the note, there's like, it tends to do big velocity jumps and they have different curves, but it's still, I haven't found a setting that I'm like, oh yeah, that's the curve. The solution would just be buy a nicer keyboard, but I like it for what it does. So yeah, that's it. Hopefully you see the atmosphere and then you could throw a drum beat on that, have some singing and throw tons of additional elements on there. We could even, I'm not sure if we could find a spot for that particular one, but I'm sure we could at some point. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.